Jim Phillips had one opportunity to make a big impression on the college football world, and he blew it. I'm going to get into why the ACC should be worried about the future of their conference on today's Locked On Boston College.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Boston College, a YouTube exclusive for today's episode. I am your host, AJ Black. On Wednesday, the ACC kicked off their ACC Kickoff 2022 with Commissioner Jim Phillips making his opening statement. And after 20 minutes of talking about all sorts of things that no one really wanted to talk about or really was all that important, he got into the meat of what everyone wanted to talk about, which was the conference realignment, the world changing around him in college football, and for all intents and purposes, the commissioner blew it. That Jim Phillips went into this with a huge opportunity to showcase where the conference is going, how the conference is going to stay with the Big Ten, with the SEC, and to me, his comments about two or three gated communities, it came across from a position of weakness. And as an ACC program, you have to be worried about the future of this conference, because he did not sound very confident at all that he has any answers to challenge what the SEC did with the additions of Oklahoma and Texas in their ever-increasing revenue stream, and what the Big Ten is doing after they added UCLA and USC. Now, Phillips, he had a few things. He said during his question and answers that he was considering there's a whole bunch of things that he wants to do to add towards the revenue for each program. But, to me, listening to what he said, it didn't sound like he had the answers that put the ACC in a power position. Because if you listen to the comments of Kevin Warren of the Big Ten or Greg Sankey of the SEC, you heard two commissioners talking about how they're looking towards the future. They have plans in place to make sure that their conferences are, ready for the changes in college football. After listening to Jim Phillips talk about academics, sports that don't really matter in terms of the grand scheme of things, I'm not saying they don't matter, but football's king, and you need to have answers for football. But for the first 20 minutes, Jim Phillips is talking about all these other sports, the Olympic sports, doing well in the classroom, all the other things that are great, but that's not what people wanted to hear. And when he finally gets to the meat and potatoes, it just seemed like he was bitter towards the SEC and Big Ten, that the plans that he has in place seem like they're kind of that's great, but it's not going to make a huge bit of difference. And it just left me with a bad taste in my mouth listening to what he had to say, because it doesn't seem like he has an answer. Now, after the fact, when he sat down, because part of the ACC media days is not just the press conference, but it's the availability. Kelly Gramlich, who used to be part of the ACC network, and some other people, David Teal of the Rowan a paper in Virginia, all got a chance to talk to him, and he kind of alluded to a few different things. First of all, the one thing he talked about was the not equitable distribution of funds, which for a program like Boston College should scare the crap out of you, but in reality is probably not the worst thing in the world. But what that would mean is, when you're looking at how all the money is distributed, they could look at, value of the brand, on-field success, commercial success, all that kind of stuff, and figure out a way to divvy it up in an uneven manner. This should help programs like Clemson, Miami, Florida State feel better, because they're going to get a bigger chunk. He talked about that. He talked about potentially having some sort of connection with the Pac-12 to get more money into the ACC network and later games. But to me, there was nothing that he said that showed me that the ACC is ready to step up to the Big Ten and SEC. That they don't have plans that are aggressive, that are strategic, that are ready to push ahead, that they in a way that is meaningful and substantial, and that is worrisome. That what he said was it came across as weak. I saw someone tweet, and I forget who it was, but it sounded like the way he was describing the ACC. It sounded like the Ivy League commissioner in 1977. Talking all about their graduation rates and all this stuff, which, believe me, is great. But in the end game of all of this, it's gross to say it, but it's not what's going to help the ACC push forward. It's something that will keep them as a valuable conference with great academics. And believe me, I love all of that about the ACC. I love that that's a commitment that maybe some of the other conferences don't do as much. But that doesn't do anything. He said he was going on and on about how the ACC is far above the SEC and Big Ten and all these other programs and all these other conferences in all these different measures, whether it was, total wins in Olympic sports and blah, blah, blah. Nice things to say, but in the end of the day, it doesn't matter, folks. That is not what's going to get the ACC over. Because what pushes the money for those programs? It's football. As much as people don't want to say it sometimes, it's football that puts the money to hire your gymnastics coach or your field hockey athletic trainer. They get the money. So when the SEC is getting twice as much as the ACC, guess what? Those Olympic sports are going to be way better than the ACC in 10 years because they're going to be able to put up better facilities, put better resources into it. So yeah, it sounds great now, but in 10 years, once the financial changes are so disparate that it makes it all really kind of pointless because the SEC and Big Ten are going to have the money to blow the ACC away. So I left with a sour taste after Jim Phillips' comments. I don't feel like he had the right tenor going into this, and I don't feel like he gave enough solutions. That being said, he mentioned two things and one slip up that kind of got me. The two things that he mentioned were there's going to be two dates coming up. I think he said at the end of July and the end of August. That sounds like could be announcements that do increase the revenue for the conference, whether it's an ESPN deal or something on that line. Good. That's a step in the right direction. I need to see what that looks like before I can actually have a take on it. Those two things were good. And then he made a slip up and said there were 17 teams in the ACC, which I think a lot of folks are laughing because they're like, "Who did the ACC add 2 teams?" I think that was just an honest slip up, and I think folks are just going to have fun with that. But those were just some things that he brought up that I was like, okay, those are interesting. But in the end of the day, the overall message didn't hit the spot for me. Did it for you? Leave it in the comment section below. And make sure to hit subscribe. This is a YouTube exclusive Locked On Boston College podcast that you're not going to get anywhere else. Make sure to subscribe, leave comments, like, share, whatever you need to do to help us get this out. This is AJ Black. You can follow me on Twitter at AJBlack_BC or on Locked On BC. Thank you all, and have a great one.